The day I almost lost my family's land was the day I discovered I owned the entire valley. Cheryl Langford called the cops on my illegal cabin at 7 a.m. Police sirens cut through the morning mist, smoke from my chimney mixing with diesel exhaust. She had no idea that I didn't just own the land. I owned her mortgage, her husband's business lease, and the road she drove in on. 3 months of escalating harassment had built to that morning. It started with noise complaints when I was dead asleep. Structure violations taped to my window for a cabin that was built in 1957, back when the only people on this ridge were loggers and elk. Then came the threatening letters, each one more ridiculous than the last. HOA letterhead, fake fines, a demand for retroactive architectural review of my roof pitch, and the last one, $900 due by the end of the month for unauthorized occupancy. That was the moment I knew it wasn't ignorance. It was war. Cheryl Langford didn't just move into Crystal Pines. She crowned herself queen of it. Bought the biggest house, dyed her poodle pink, got herself elected HOA president on a platform of neighborhood beautification. Then she started looking uphill, at me. Never mind that I'd lived here before the subdivision was even carved out of the trees. Never mind that my cabin's property line doesn't just stretch past their fences. It wraps around all 36 of their lots like a giant horseshoe. They think I'm the intruder. But this valley has my family name on it. When the sheriff showed up that morning, I was already outside, minding my firewood. I waved and offered him coffee. He didn't step out of the cruiser, just sighed, leaned over and said, "She called it in as a Code 43, unauthorized dwelling in HOA territory. You know anything about that?" I looked past him. Cheryl was standing at the edge of the gravel, arms crossed, smug as ever. Her little HOA clipboard hugged to her chest like a badge. "Sheriff," I said, "you want to see something interesting?" I walked to the shed, pulled out the deed binder, and flipped to page 1. It wasn't just a deed. It was the full land trust, with her street and her house right in the center of it. The sheriff stepped out then, not because Cheryl told him to, because he saw the paperwork. He took the binder gently, walked it back to his cruiser, and spent the next 5 minutes reading in silence while I stood by the woodpile, splitting kindling like it was any other Saturday. Cheryl must have taken that as some kind of cue. She stomped over in her fleece boots like she owned the forest. "This man is squatting," she snapped. "There's no power, no plumbing. He's cooking over an open fire. This isn't 1840, it's Crystal Pines. I'm filing a Class B violation," and the sheriff held up a hand. "Cheryl, this cabin sits on 146 acres of recorded deeded land. It predates Crystal Pines by 67 years. He owns the surrounding parcel, access road," and he turned the page. "The private rights to the water main that feeds the valley." She blinked. That's when she realized she didn't just lose this round. She'd picked a fight with the landowner who controlled her entire neighborhood's infrastructure. "I want to appeal," she said, but her voice cracked halfway through. "He can't just live here. There are community standards." "Ma'am," the sheriff said, "the only reason you have community standards is because his family allowed this HOA to lease the lots back when they broke ground. You don't have legal control here. He does." I stayed quiet. No need to gloat. Cheryl spun around and stormed back to her car like the ground under her feet was lava. But that wasn't the end of it. Later that afternoon, I got a knock. A real estate developer, clipboard in hand, polite smile on his face. "Mr. Martin," he said, "I'm here on behalf of Crystal Pines Development. We'd love to discuss your rights of way, particularly regarding emergency access roads and utility lines." They were panicking, and I hadn't even said a word yet. By Monday, Cheryl was sending apology emails through the HOA address. "Misunderstanding. Overstep. We value our neighbors." But the tone had changed. The queen had realized the castle wasn't hers. I didn't reply. Not yet, because I'd only just started reading what my grandfather left me in that land binder. There was a clause in the trust about usage rights, and a section about development encroachment penalties, and a handwritten note in the back: "Only enforce if they forget who owns the valley." By Thursday, I started noticing small changes around the valley. The maintenance crew that used to come every week to prune and pressure wash Cheryl's cul-de-sac just stopped showing up. Trash cans sat full. The sprinkler system sputtered out. I hadn't done anything, not directly, but I did place a single call to the water rights office in town and confirmed what I suspected. Crystal Pines had been quietly pulling from my side of the creek without paying the annual easement fee. That call triggered a review, and that review triggered a temporary hold on their automated systems. Water pressure dropped to a trickle across half the development. I watched from the edge of my porch as Cheryl stood in her bathrobe, screaming at a landscaper who just shrugged and pointed to the dry ground. I went back inside, made coffee, and kept reading the trust binder. My grandfather had been a smart man. Turns out he'd leased the surrounding parcels to Crystal Pines with two fail-safes. Any attempt to fine, evict, or restrict the legacy cabin would void portions of the agreement. That included their discounted rates on road access, sewer runoff, and more. So I made another call, this time to the county office. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just sent over a scan of the lease terms. Within a day, Crystal Pines received a formal notification. Their valley-wide permit would be reviewed unless they came into full compliance with the legacy landowner agreement. I wasn't suing. I wasn't making threats. I was just holding them to their word. That's when Cheryl tried a different angle. She showed up again. No police this time. No clipboard. She wore a puffy vest and brought a pie. Knocked 3 times. Loud but polite. I didn't answer. She left it on the wood stump and walked back to her Lexus without saying a word. I tossed the pie that evening. Didn't trust it. But now she was nervous, desperate. Because what she didn't know was that I'd started meeting with the resort board. Yes, their board. A few of them owned short-term rentals in the valley, and they were livid about the water slowdown. They wanted to talk. They asked what it would take to stabilize things. I smiled, told them I had a few ideas. See, Cheryl had spent months trying to push me out of the one cabin I built by hand. But now she was about to learn just how small she really was in the place I called home. And the valley? The valley was remembering. By the second week of April, the HOA was in full panic mode. A dozen homes had brown lawns. Construction on 2 new model homes had stalled, and emails were bouncing around between the resort board, county planning, and Cheryl's HOA leadership like popcorn in a skillet. Still, I hadn't filed a lawsuit. I hadn't raised my voice. All I'd done was enforce the terms they'd forgotten I held. I got a letter delivered by courier that Monday. It was an official apology, signed by Cheryl and 2 other board members, rescinding all fines, complaints, and warnings against my unauthorized structure. They referred to it now as the historic cabin. They even offered to fund its restoration. I laughed, didn't respond. Because the truth is, I was already talking to investors. The whole valley sat on a natural aquifer. With the right permits and environmental safeguards, I could build a self-sustaining eco-retreat. 10 cabins max, designed to blend into the hillside. The resort would still function, but now on my terms. That night, Cheryl came knocking again. No pie this time, no fake smiles, just a woman with too much pride and too little leverage. I didn't know who you were, she said, voice low. I was just trying to follow protocol. I didn't let her finish. You made my life hell over a cabin I built with my father, I said, stepping outside. You called the cops, sent threats. You never asked. You assumed. She looked like she wanted to cry, but I didn't feel sorry. Not for people who punch down and play victim when the truth hits back. Please, she said, don't ruin us. I don't need to, I replied. You already did that. She left, and I haven't seen her since. But I did get a call from her husband 3 days later. He wanted to sell their home, quietly off-market, said they were moving closer to family. I didn't ask where. I told him I'd think about it. After all, it sat on a parcel I owned outright. 1 missed lease payment and they'd be trespassing. Funny how the valley stays quiet now. No sirens, no fake violations, just the sound of wind through the pine, smoke curling from my chimney, and the feeling that my grandfather's land, our land, is finally at peace again. Because in this valley, respect isn't optional and entitlement gets evicted.